They say life throws curveballs when you least expect them. Well, mine wasn't a curveball. It was a full-blown wrecking ball, and it hit me when I least deserved it. Let me set the stage. I was 38, married to Laura for 10 years, and we had 2 amazing kids, Emily 8 and Jake 6. Life wasn't perfect, but it was good enough. That is, until the universe decided to pull the rug from under me. I got sick, seriously sick. Doctor's orders? Take a break and focus on recovery. Easy advice to give, but not so easy when your bills don't take a break with you. At first, Laura was supportive, sort of. She brought me soup, even if it was the canned kind. And she smiled through clenched teeth while reminding me about the growing stack of unpaid bills. But the cracks in her patience widened fast. Within weeks, the eye rolls started. A month later, she began working late. By the 3rd month, it wasn't even a secret anymore. One night, I caught her slipping out the door in heels and a tight dress she hadn't worn in years. "Where are you going?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Out," she said, avoiding eye contact. "Out where?" "Why do you care? You're too busy being sick to notice anything else." And just like that, she was gone. I didn't need Sherlock Holmes to figure it out. Laura wasn't working late. She was working on someone else, Jack, her personal trainer. The guy had biceps bigger than my thighs and a brain smaller than a walnut. Fast forward a month, and Laura officially checked out of our marriage. She left me and the kids with nothing but a hastily scribbled note on the fridge that read, "I need space. Don't try to contact me." Space? She could have just joined NASA. At first, I thought I'd feel relief when she left. No more tension. No more fights about how I wasn't man enough to support the family, while also battling a potentially life-threatening illness. But relief didn't come. Instead, it was just me. 2 kids who didn't understand why mommy wasn't coming home, and a pile of unpaid bills that could probably qualify as a national monument. Emily was the first to ask. "Daddy, when's mommy coming back?" she said, her big brown eyes staring up at me with a mix of confusion and hope. I froze. What do you even say to that? "Oh, sweetie, mommy's too busy running off with her gym buddy to care about us right now." "Yeah, no. She's taking some time to figure things out," I said, trying not to choke on the words. Jake chimed in, his 6-year-old logic as sharp as ever. "Can't she figure things out here? We got lots of space." I ruffled his hair and forced a smile. "I wish, buddy. I really do." That night, after putting the kids to bed, I sat in the dark living room staring at the note Laura had left. Space. That word kept echoing in my head, mocking me. Meanwhile, I was barely holding it together, trying to figure out how to keep the lights on and food on the table. And then, like some cosmic joke, the divorce papers showed up. No call, no text, just a knock on the door and a smug courier handing me an envelope with Laura's lawyer's name plastered all over it. She didn't even bother to sign them herself. She sent her lawyer to do the dirty work. At first, I was angry. Then I realized something that almost made me laugh. She didn't even care enough to fight me. I had full custody of the kids, and her lawyer accepted every term my lawyer drafted without so much as a revision. She didn't want the house, the car, or the kids, just freedom. Good riddance, I muttered to myself, signing the papers and sending them back without a second thought. The next few months were brutal. Between chemo sessions and working part-time whenever I could manage, I felt like I was barely hanging on. But here's the thing about hitting rock bottom. It gives you a solid foundation to rebuild. My buddy Chris stepped up in ways I never expected. He helped me get a remote job as a tech consultant. The hours were flexible, and the pay was good enough to start climbing out of the financial hole Laura had left me in. "Man, you're like a phoenix," Chris said one night after I told him about my new gig. "Yeah, but instead of rising from ashes, I'm crawling out of debt," I shot back. We both laughed, and for the first time in months, it felt genuine. Fast forward 1.5 years, and life was finally starting to make sense again. Emily and Jake were thriving, I had a stable income, and my health was back on track. I'd even saved up enough to take the kids on a little weekend trip to the mountains. a memory I knew they needed as much as I did. Then, just when I thought I'd seen the last of Laura, she showed up. Pregnant. On my doorstep. It was a Saturday morning, and the kids were out back playing in the yard. I just brewed my coffee and was about to settle into the couch when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, but hey, maybe Amazon had delivered my latest impulse purchase early. I opened the door, and there she was, Laura. And she wasn't alone. Her belly was as round as a beach ball, and her expression was somewhere between regretful and desperate. She had a suitcase with her, which was hilarious because it implied she thought I'd actually let her in. "Thomas," she started, her voice softer than I remembered. "Can we talk?" I stared at her, taking in the scene. She looked like someone who'd been run over by life, and maybe Jack's car, considering he was nowhere to be seen. "Oh, this should be good," I said, leaning against the doorframe. "What do you want, Laura?" I made mistakes," she stammered, her eyes already welling up. "I know I hurt you. I know I hurt the kids. But I'm here to make things right." I let out a laugh, loud, unfiltered, and entirely sarcastic. "Make things right? You mean after abandoning us for Jack the Meathead? Or does this little reunion have more to do with the fact that you're obviously carrying his child and he probably bailed on you?" Her face turned red, and she looked down. "Bingo. I have nowhere else to go," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Jack's gone. I've been staying in a motel, but I can't do this alone." "You don't say," I replied, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Let me get this straight. You ditched me and the kids to play house with Jack, and now that he's out of the picture, you think you can waltz back in here, pregnant, and everything will just go back to normal?" "I'm their mother," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Don't you think they deserve to have me in their lives?" "Deserve?" I repeated, shaking my head. "Laura, you haven't earned the right to say that. You abandoned them. You didn't even fight for custody. You wanted space, remember? Well, congratulations. You've got all the space in the world, and it's going to stay that way." I took a deep breath, trying to rein in the anger boiling under my skin. The kids didn't need to see this. "Now, if you'll excuse me," I said, stepping back inside. "I have a life to live, one that doesn't involve you. Goodbye, Laura." I shut the door in her face. Through the window, I saw her stand there for a few moments before dragging her suitcase down the driveway. I should have felt triumphant, but mostly I just felt tired. A few days later, things took a turn for the worse. Emily came home from school and casually mentioned that Mommy had visited her at Grandma and Grandpa's house. I froze. "What did you just say?" She blinked up at me, oblivious to the storm brewing behind my eyes. "Mommy, she came to see us at Grandma and Grandpa's. We played a game, and she said she missed us." My blood ran cold. I sat there, gripping the edge of the counter so hard I thought it might crack. Emily, blissfully unaware, was twirling a crayon in her hand, talking about how Mommy had played board games with her and Jake. My mind was racing, connecting dots I didn't even want to see. "Sweetheart," I said, keeping my tone as calm as I could manage. "When did Mommy come to visit?" "Oh, last weekend," she chirped. "Grandma and Grandpa said it was a surprise. They told us not to tell you." "Of course they did." "Right," I said, forcing a smile. "Hey, why don't you and Jake go set up the Monopoly board? I'll be there in a second." As soon as they were out of earshot, I grabbed my phone and dialed. "Thomas, what's this about?" my mother answered, her voice carrying that signature defensive tone she always used when she knew she was caught. "Don't play dumb," I said, my voice low and controlled. "Emily told me Laura's been visiting them at your house. Care to explain?" There was a pause, the kind of pause that makes your stomach churn. "She's their mother, Thomas," my mom finally said, like that explained everything. "They deserve to see her." I laughed, one of those bitter, humorless laughs that creeps out when you're too mad to think straight. "Oh, so now you're the authority on what my kids deserve? Because I seem to recall you supporting me through the divorce when she abandoned them." "She's changed," my dad chimed in from the background. Of course he was there. They were always a tag team when it came to justifying bad decisions. She regrets what happened and wants to be part of their lives again. Yeah? I snapped. She regrets it so much she didn't even fight for custody? She regrets it so much she's only showing up now that her boy toy bailed and left her pregnant? Spare me the lecture, Dad. Thomas, my mom said, her voice softening into that, I'm trying to reason with you tone. The kids need a mother. What they don't need, I shot back, is someone who walked out on them without a second thought. And they sure as hell don't need grandparents sneaking her into their lives behind my back. Don't talk to us like that, my dad barked. We've done nothing but support you. No, I interrupted, my voice rising. You supported her, and you went behind my back to do it. You betrayed me and my kids. Don't you dare twist this around. There was silence on the other end, but I could hear them breathing, trying to come up with something to say. I didn't give them the chance. This stops now, I said firmly. You're done letting her see the kids. If you ever pull this stunt again, I'll make damn sure you never see them either. Do I make myself clear? Thomas, do I make myself clear? I repeated. Fine, my mom finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. Good, I said, hanging up before they could say anything else. My hands were shaking as I set the phone down, but the anger felt strangely liberating. That night, after the kids were asleep, I called my lawyer. Restraining order, I said without hesitation. He let out a low whistle. Against your ex-wife, I assume? And my parents, I added. There was a pause on his end. Your parents too? Yep, I said, leaning back in my chair. They've been letting her see my kids behind my back. I'm done playing nice. Before you find out what happens next, please subscribe to the channel. The thing about going nuclear is that there's no turning back once you push the button. I knew this wasn't going to end with hugs and apologies, but at this point, I didn't care. My priority was keeping my kids safe, from Laura, from her manipulative games, and from my parents, who clearly couldn't see past their own delusional ideas of family harmony. The next morning, I walked into my lawyer's office with more resolve than I'd felt in years. Scott, my attorney, was the kind of guy who didn't believe in sugarcoating anything. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, as I laid out the whole sordid mess. So, let me get this straight, he said, eyebrows raised. Your ex-wife abandoned her kids, showed up pregnant by some other guy, and now your parents are secretly letting her see them? Bingo, I said, crossing my arms. And I want it to stop. Yesterday. Scott let out a low whistle. Man, your life's like a bad soap opera, no offense. None taken, I replied dryly. Now how do we make this happen? Over the next week, Scott got to work drafting the necessary documents for a restraining order against Laura. He also outlined the steps for limiting my parents' contact with the kids if they didn't fall in line. The guy was a shark in the courtroom, and I trusted him to handle this mess. In the meantime, I braced myself for the inevitable fallout. My parents weren't the type to sit back quietly. And Laura? Well, let's just say I wasn't expecting her to knit me a thank you scarf. The first shot came 3 days later when my mom showed up at my house, uninvited. Thomas? She started, her tone the perfect mix of indignation and disappointment. How could you do this to us? To your own parents? I stood in the doorway, blocking her from stepping inside. You mean, how could I try to protect my kids from the woman who abandoned them? Pretty easily, actually. She huffed, clutching her purse like it contained the moral high ground. We were only trying to help. Laura deserves a second chance. I let out a laugh, short, bitter, and completely devoid of humor. Second chance? Mom, she's on, like, her 5th chance, and every single time she's managed to screw it up. You don't get to make that call, not with my kids. She's their mother, my mom snapped. No, she's the woman who gave birth to them and then walked out, I shot back. Big difference. My dad, who'd been waiting in the car, finally decided to join the conversation. You're being unreasonable, Thomas. We're their grandparents. We have a right to see them. Sure, I said, shrugging. as long as you're not acting as Laura's secret accomplices. But you crossed that line. You went behind my back, and now you're dealing with the consequences." "Consequences?" my mom repeated, her voice rising. "You're seriously going to cut us out of your life over this?" "No," I said, stepping forward and lowering my voice. "You cut yourselves out when you decided Laura's feelings were more important than my kid's safety." They stood there, speechless, as I closed the door. I wasn't slamming it. I was done with the drama. A week later, we were in court. Laura showed up, looking every bit the part of the wronged woman. It didn't work. Scott tore through her defense like a hot knife through butter. Every lie she tried to spin, every excuse she made, he countered with cold, hard facts. By the time the judge handed down the restraining order, her face was a mix of rage and defeat. As for my parents, they didn't even show up. Maybe they realized they couldn't win this fight. Or maybe they just couldn't face me. Either way, the restraining order applied to them too, and I made it clear I wasn't backing down. That evening, I sat on the couch with Emily and Jake, watching their favorite movie. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt peace. Sure, there was still work to do, therapy sessions, rebuilding trust, but for now, we were okay. And then the phone buzzed. A number I didn't recognize. Curious, I answered. "Hi, is this Thomas?" came a warm, slightly nervous voice. "This is Sophie, from Jake's school. I think he left his jacket here, and I just wanted to make sure you knew." Jake's teacher. Great. "Oh, thanks for letting me know," I said, trying not to sound too flustered. "I'll swing by tomorrow to pick it up." "No problem," she said, her tone light. "And if you ever need help with anything, let me know. My son really likes Jake. I think they're becoming good friends." I hung up, a small smile creeping across my face. Maybe, just maybe, life wasn't done surprising me yet. Life has a funny way of throwing curveballs, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like the ball wasn't aimed directly at my head. Sophie's call had caught me off guard, but in a good way. It wasn't every day that someone reached out with genuine kindness, especially after the chaos I'd just been through. The next morning, I dropped the kids off at school and decided to swing by Sophie's classroom to pick up Jake's jacket. When I walked in, I wasn't sure what to expect, but I definitely didn't expect her. She was standing by the chalkboard, a smile on her face, as she helped a group of kids with an art project. Her long brown hair was tied back, and there was a softness in her eyes that immediately put me at ease. "Mr. Thomas!" one of the kids yelled, pointing at me like I was a celebrity. Sophie turned, her smile widening when she saw me. "You must be Jake's dad," she said, walking over with the jacket in hand. "Guilty," I said, smiling back. "And you must be Sophie, the jacket rescue hero." She laughed, a soft, genuine sound that I hadn't realized I needed to hear. "It's all in a day's work. Jake's a great kid, by the way, always helping out his friends." "That's all him," I said. "I just try to keep him from eating crayons." She laughed again, and for a moment I forgot about everything else. Laura, the restraining order, my parents. It was just nice. Over the next few weeks, Sophie and I kept running into each other. First, it was at a school event where Jake and her son Max were performing in a little play. Then at the park, where the kids had somehow orchestrated a playdate without telling us. By the third coincidental meeting, it was clear the kids were up to something. "Do you think they're plotting against us?" I joked as we watched them climb the jungle gym. "Absolutely," she said, sipping her coffee. "Max told me yesterday that I should smile more because Mr. Thomas is funny." "Great," I said, rolling my eyes. "I'm being set up by a 6-year-old. She laughed, and this time I joined in. It felt good, light, easy. Something I hadn't felt in years. Eventually one thing led to another, and we decided to have a proper dinner together. Not as a date, of course, just two parents with kids who got along. Or at least that's how I justified it to myself. That night, as Sophie and Max came over, I couldn't help but notice how natural it all felt. Emily and Jake were thrilled to have their new friends over, and Sophie fit into the chaos of my house like she'd always been part of it. After the kids were tucked in, Sophie and I sat on the porch with cups of tea, the night air cool but comfortable. "You know," she said, looking out at the stars, "it's nice to see you laugh. You have a good laugh." "Thanks," I said, a bit awkwardly. "It's been a while since I've had much to laugh about." She nodded, her expression soft. "I get that. It's not easy being a single parent, but you're doing a great job. Your kids are lucky to have you." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just sipped my tea and nodded. "And you?" I finally asked. "How are you holding up?" She smiled faintly. "Some days are harder than others. Losing my husband wasn't easy, but Max keeps me going. And it's nice to have people who understand." Her eyes met mine, and for the first time in a long time, I felt something I thought I'd lost forever: hope. Dating again felt strange at first, like trying to ride a bike after years of walking everywhere. But Sophie made it easy. She wasn't flashy or overbearing. She was warm, genuine, and had a way of making the world feel a little less heavy. Our first official date was at a cozy Italian restaurant downtown. I'll admit, I was nervous. The last time I'd been on a date, the internet was still debating whether Facebook would replace MySpace. "You look great," I said when I picked her up, and I meant it. She wore a simple blue dress that matched her eyes, and her smile was enough to calm my nerves. "Thanks," she said. "You clean up pretty well yourself." Dinner went smoothly, no awkward silences, no weird food mishaps, just easy conversation and plenty of laughs. I told her about Emily's obsession with dinosaurs and Jake's latest attempt to build a rocket out of cardboard. She shared stories about Max's endless curiosity and her late husband's sense of humor. By the end of the night, it felt like we'd known each other forever. A couple of dates later, we decided to take the kids on a picnic. It was Sophie's idea, and the kids were thrilled. We spent the afternoon at a park by the lake, where Jake and Max raced to see who could skip rocks the farthest, while Emily tried to teach Sophie the names of every dinosaur she knew. As we sat on a blanket, watching the kids play, Sophie leaned over and said, "You know, this feels right." "Yeah," I said, smiling. "It really does." Things moved quickly after that. Sophie and Max started spending more time at our place, and eventually, I asked her if she wanted to make it official. "Move in with me and the kids." "Are you sure?" she asked, her eyes searching mine. "Absolutely," I said. "The kids adore you. I adore you. And it feels like you've been part of this family from the start." She smiled, and that was that. Sophie and Max moved in, and for the first time in years, my house felt like a home. But life has a way of testing you, just when you think you've finally caught a break. One evening, Sophie and I were putting the kids to bed when my phone buzzed with a text from a friend. "Hey, just heard Laura had her baby. As far as I know, your parents are helping her a lot, including financially. Thought you'd want to know." I stared at the screen, my stomach twisting. Laura's drama had been blissfully absent for months, but now she had a newborn, and I had a bad feeling about what that meant. As if on cue, the next day, Emily came home from school with a strange story. "Daddy, guess who I saw today?" she said, dropping her backpack. "Who?" I asked, already bracing myself. "Mommy," she said. "She was in the parking lot, but Mr. James wouldn't let her talk to us. He said she wasn't allowed." Mr. James, the school's principal, was a no-nonsense guy who'd been briefed on the restraining order. I made a mental note to send him a thank you card. That night, I called my parents. "Care to explain why Laura's back in the picture? And how the hell do I know you're still helping her with everything?" I asked, skipping the pleasantries. There was a long pause before my mom said, "Thomas, she's struggling." Her maternal instinct was awakened, so she tried to see Emily at school. And as for our help, I can explain. She has a newborn and no one to help her. We couldn't just turn her away. I pinched the bridge of my nose, trying to stay calm. "She's struggling? She left me when I was sick and broke, Mom. She abandoned her kids. And now you're playing savior? She's pregnant, my mom said, her voice softening. Well, was. And your father had a dream. He believes it was a sign from God to help her. I blinked. A dream? Seriously? Yes, my dad chimed in. In the dream, I saw her alone, crying, holding her stomach. It felt like a message. We couldn't ignore it. I let out a long sigh. My parents were deeply religious, and while I respected their beliefs, this was a stretch. Look, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, I get that you think you're doing the right thing, but when it comes to my kids, I'm the one who decides what's right. And Laura? She doesn't get to waltz back into their lives whenever she feels like it. Are we clear? My mom sniffled. We're sorry, Thomas. Truly. We just felt like we had to do something. Well, don't, I said firmly. She's made her choices, and so have I. This is my family now, and I won't let her ruin it again. Later that week, Laura tried one last stunt, showing up at our house, baby in tow. I didn't even let her finish her sob story before cutting her off. Laura, leave. Now. Or the next call I make will be to the police. Her face fell, but I didn't flinch. She turned and left without another word, and I watched as she disappeared down the street. That night, as Sophie and I sat on the couch, she reached for my hand. You okay? She asked. Yeah, I said, squeezing her hand. I'm more than okay. For the first time, I feel like I'm finally in control. The next few months were blissfully quiet. Laura didn't attempt to contact me or the kids, and for the first time in years, I felt like we could breathe. Life with Sophie was everything I'd hoped for. Peaceful, full of love, and steady. Emily and Jake were thriving, and even Max had started calling me Mr. T, which made us all laugh. Then, one afternoon, my phone buzzed. It was my dad. Hey, Dad, everything okay? I asked, expecting the usual small talk. Thomas, he began, his voice unusually serious. I wanted to let you know, Laura won't be bothering you anymore. She's moving out of town. I felt a wave of relief but stayed quiet, waiting for the but. It came, right on cue. But I think you should forgive her, he continued. Maybe not now, but someday. And maybe, just maybe, you could let her see the kids. I sighed, pinching the bridge of my nose. Dad, we've been over this. She gave up that right when she left. She's their mother, he said softly. Forgiveness is a cornerstone of faith, Thomas. You can't carry this grudge forever. I knew this was coming. My dad couldn't resist throwing in a religious angle. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us, he quoted. Dad, I said, keeping my voice calm. I get it. Really, I do. But my priority is protecting my kids. Maybe someday, when they're older, we can revisit this. But not now. Not this year. My answer is no. He paused, and I could hear him sigh on the other end of the line. You're a good man, Thomas. I just hope you can find it in your heart to let go of this anger. I'll think about it, I said, even though I wasn't sure I meant it. But it's my decision, and I'm sticking to it for now. Later that night, after Sophie and the kids had gone to bed, I sat alone on the couch, replaying the conversation in my head. Forgiveness. Was that really the answer? Or was it just another way of letting Laura off the hook for everything she'd done? I still don't know. Maybe my dad was right. Maybe forgiveness is the key to moving on. But it's not just about me. It's about Emily and Jake. They're the ones who will have to decide what role, if any, Laura plays in their lives. Maybe when they're older they'll want to know her. Or maybe they won't. Either way, I'll respect their choice when the time comes. By the way, dear listeners or readers, you can write your opinion about my solutions in the comments. For now, I just want to thank you, yes, you, for listening to my story, for letting me vent, reflect, and sort through this mess. Life isn't perfect, but it's getting better every day. And I'm grateful for every single moment. Thank you for being here. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to the channel. I wish you a great mood and good luck.